Hi everyone, this is just a quick video to get you introduced to Module 4. Module 4 is the halfway point of the semester, so at the end of this module we will be at the midpoint. There's a couple things that you want to be thinking about because we're at midterm. Keep track of your grades. You only have another half of the semester to get the grade that you want. Other things is we'll have a midpoint survey that I'll talk about in a minute, and the first journal is done. So the second half of the semester you will complete the second journal. That way you've got a grade in the middle for those journal entries that you have been completing. If you haven't done any journal entries, you have a lot of catching up to do. So I'm going to just walk through the module with you and talk a little bit about some of the assignments that you'll be working on. So first of all, you can see that I actually opened up both Module 4 and 5. Not everything in Module 5 is available to submit to yet, but I still have those open so you can kind of see where we're going from here. We're in the poetry section of the class, so we are moving past the fiction section. You won't be writing any more short stories. We're now focusing on poetry. Poetry is a completely different style of writing, and I know some of you from your introduction emails told me that poetry was kind of your preferred way to write, and that's great. Some of you may have never written a poem before, so this will be a little bit more challenging for you. Use the textbook as your guide. There's a lot of great information in there, and so that can kind of help you get started. There's a lot of examples in there as well, and so we're going to be exploring different ways of writing poetry using similar concept to the first two modules for fiction, which is you'll do one poem in Unit 4 or Module 4 and then 2 poems in Module 5. And so we'll kind of build on those skills. And so you'll get one kind of easier practice one out of the way and then a little bit harder for Module 5. Now I've got all of your point of view short stories have been graded and given back to you. And I know that you just turned in your character and energy short stories, so you should be getting some feedback on those. I would guess starting next week will be when you start to get some feedback on those. And keep in mind that writing poetry is so different from writing fiction. It's hard to use those kind of comments except for things like vocabulary, imagery, stuff like that, that can carry over to poetry. So just want to take a look at the module here with you. Don't forget this journal is due. So all 8 of your entries need to be done and they need to be uploaded separately. Don't upload one long entry with 8 pages worth of stuff. Every single one of the entries needs to be uploaded separately. So you need to have 8 posts in that journal. Otherwise you won't get credit for them. So keep that in mind. That is graded after this module. So make sure that you have all 8 of them. You can go in and check and count all 8 of them. Then of course you're reading the chapter on poetry, which is actually the first section of the textbook, and then taking the quiz, so you will so I can see that you know how to do poetry or what poetry is all about. We're also doing a similar discussion board to the discussion board that we did in the last module, which is, so we started with story elements, now we're doing poetry elements. So again, there are 3 threads already created on this discussion board, and you respond to each of the 3 threads. You do not create any new threads, and you don't respond to your peers' threads. And it's the same thing that we did for the short story elements, where you do the first 2 threads, and then you have to go back in and look at your peers' responses to the first 2 threads, and then create your third thread response. So keep in mind that this one takes a little bit longer, so I recommend going in and doing the first 2 threads as soon as you can. That way your peers will have something to look at and everyone has a chance to get that 3rd thread post completed. So that's the part that takes a little bit longer. The poem assignment that you're working on in this unit is the Mimicry Poem. And so I've got some information on mimicry in here, and I've got some links to different places that will help you out a little bit. And then the chapter in the textbook talks a little bit about mimicry as well. I also have a video here it's a little bit humorous. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Weird Al Yankovic. He tends to do a lot of parody type videos. And so mimicry and parody have the same concept to them. And you're welcome to, with your mimicry poem, do that. You can make a humorous version, take a serious poem and mimic it using humor as opposed to mimicking the tone as well. And so it's entirely up to you how you write your mimicry poem, but this is just an example using a Lady Gaga video. So you can kind of see how that works. And then we get to the poem submission at the end. So the poem assignment is right here, and it just explains how to do an imitation poem. Their mimicry, also called imitation. And so it gives you some ideas here for what to think about and what the requirements are for the poem. Poems, a lot of students feel like, or approach it as, they don't take as long as a short story to write, which is not true. Poems can sometimes take even longer than a short story because you are focused so much on individual words, how they go together. There are thousands of ways that you could put a poem together, and until you get to the right version of it, it can be very frustrating. So keep in mind that just like a short story, I expect you to go through drafting, work on it several times. Don't just come up with something and slap it together and call it a poem. You need to work on this, work on the wording, try out different things. And try, in this case, since you're mimicking another poem, choose carefully for that first poem so that when you sit down to try and write out a mimicry, you're not getting yourself all tangled up. So that's the last thing that you submit here is the actual poem submission, and you're going to do it just like you do a short story. Make sure you type it out in a Word document and upload that file. Do not type it in the submission text box because it takes away all of your formatting and I can't read it properly. So make sure that you are putting it in there. You also need to, of course, turn in the mimicked poem. So we need to know what the original poem is and then what yours looked like. The last thing in here is the Midpoint Survey. The Midpoint Survey is an opportunity for you to give me feedback on the class at midterm. This is an important survey. It's anonymous, so I don't see who is responding, and I can't see what your individual response is. But I will give you extra credit for it. So if you complete it, then I can give you extra credit for it. It's just your opportunity to tell me what's working in the class, what's not working in the class, what can I do to make the class better for you, what can I do to improve your experience in the class. And so that way I can make changes for the second half of the semester if I think that they're warranted. So that's the next module then what we're working on. Like I said, halfway point of the semester, definitely if you have questions, especially about your grade, about anything that we're working on, about poetry in general, it can be a little bit more difficult, please send me an email. Otherwise, I hope that you have a great weekend.